I decided to make a little video to go through my process for keeping up with the literature. I'm going to cover three things. Just keeping up with new studies, systems for doing that. Then I'm going to talk about reference management, and then just kind of compiling the stuff that you find. So the first thing I want to talk about is RSS feeds. So RSS feeds, some might say, oh, they're kind of passé or something, but I find them incredibly useful. So I keep up with my RSS feeds in INO Reader. I used to use Feedly, but I switched over after a recommendation from a colleague that there are some advantages to INO Reader. One of them being that the RSS links don't expire. So one of the problems with Feedly is after 25 days or something, the stuff would disappear, and so then I would lose things, which is a bummer. So I like INO Reader better for that. Also, INO Reader allows for me to have a thing where I list on my website the journals I read, and people can actually click and get an RSS feed for all the journals that I read. So that's really cool that other people can see it. In my reader, I subscribe to both communication journals as well as area studies journals, and then it's just stuff that's of interest to me. So you can see it's a lot to keep up with, but it's nice because I can go to one place and I can see I have 80 new articles to read. I sort it by the actual study. So if I see this and I'm like, oh, this looks pretty interesting to me, I'll open the link. I see, oh, this is what's cool. I might skim the abstract and say, oh, this looks really good. I don't have time to read this right now, so I'll put it in my to read folder. I use the reference manager Mendeley, so I'll show how I import there. But you might be wondering, how do you get these RSS feeds in here? If you just go to a journal, here's the Journal of HealthCom. If you go to About This Journal, or even the front page, they'll usually have something that says, here's the link to the RSS feed. And all you have to do is you copy that. You go to your reader of choice, you paste it in, it'll say, hey, do you want to add the feed to this? I'll say, yeah, I do. And it'll say, do you want to add it to a folder? And I'll say, yeah, add it to my academic journals folder. And then all of these will show up. I will say that some journals will have different feeds. So, for example, if I go to like a SAGE journal, sorry, I just went to the quickest link, and here's the login. You don't want to do it logged in with your university stuff, but here's like American Behavioral Scientist. Let me get rid of the university login. And if you go to a SAGE journal About, and you go down here to RSS, they'll usually have like the online first versus the recent articles. I just subscribe to both. It's nice having the online first. And you can just copy and paste that into your reader, and they will show up for you every day. So RSS feeders are the best way. I will say I'm a little sad that the big communication journals have switched to Oxford University Press for their publications, because they do not have as robust RSS feeds. So you can click on alerts, and they want you to set this up as using Oxford Academic University Press login. And then you get these like email alerts. Well, apparently that's not my password. I just signed up for all of these when these all got started up. Well, whatever. Let's assume that I could figure it out. So that's a bummer. But I did see that you can like click on their like latest article feed. Where is that? Right here's advanced articles. Maybe. Yeah. So there is an RSS feeder that you can get over here. So, you know, you can go import that into your reader. It's probably going to tell me, hey, you're already subscribed to this. At least I should have been. I probably was. But you can't, it's just for the current issue. They don't have like the advanced article alerts except via email. So that really annoys me a lot, but it is what it is. But anyway, that's how it works for Oxford. But so you can see, like, in my reader, you can see that there's a ton of Sage. You can see with most of the Sage ones, I have both, like, I usually have 2 feeds for each Sage because it'll be, like, both the advanced and whatever. So, yeah, so that's one way to do it. The second way I get articles is through Google Scholar alerts. So if you're in good old Google Scholar and you type in a keyword, you're like, social media, consent or something, and you're like, oh, these articles, you can just click on this little create alert and it will send it to your Gmail, any new articles on this. So that's really cool. But it doesn't just have to be for a particular set of keywords. If you're like, I really like this article, let's say you really liked this article, and you click on it, you can create, not on that, you click on who has cited it, and then you can click create alert and it'll do any citations to this article. So that's really awesome. Also for people, if the author has set up their Google Scholar profile like Christian Fuchs has, you can also do a thing where any new articles by that person, any new citations or any articles related to their research, you can get little alerts for. So that's awesome too. So my Google Alerts are really extensive. I've been using them for years. I do it on keywords of interest. I do it on authors of interest. I do it for articles that get cited. I do it for myself, obviously. So I have just so many of them. Actually, I have to like go through and delete some every now and then because I don't have any room for them. So how this manifests itself is in my Gmail every day. I get Google Scholar alerts for all my various keywords. And it was kind of funny. Yesterday I had an article come out. So I had a really huge amount of Google Scholar alerts because a bunch of keywords I use showed up in the article. A lot of articles that I cite regularly showed up. So here's Context Collapse. And this issue of International Journal of Communication came out that a lot of people, including me, talked about that term, but this is fantastic. And the thing that I kind of personally like about this coming into my email box is that if I don't read these all the time. And so if I'm like, oh, what's been posted that talked about, for example, blackmail in social media is one that I have, blackmail. I can type this and you can see like months of Google Scholar alerts that I haven't opened came up. But if I'm interested in that topic at the time, to me, this is a much more efficient way to look through things than looking at Google Scholar. So you can see, like, I look through these, I'm like, oh, actually, like, these are kind of distant from my interest, so I just delete it, and I don't have to worry about it ever again. So this is super duper useful for me, that they're kind of sitting in my email for me to peruse when I need it, or if I'm just, like, have time to kill, I can go to my Google Scholar alerts in my Gmail and, like, look through, oh, what's new? Okay, that's cool. What's new? Oh, yeah, that's not that interesting to me. Just delete it. Like I said, this is like way more efficient for me than anything else. And I have to say, keeping up with the literature is important for a number of reasons. Like, obviously, you know what's going on in your research area. But also what's nice is even if I didn't necessarily read the whole article at the time, I can flag it to read it later. But also it's cool, like if I bump into people, I can at least like, somewhere in my brain is the idea that, you know, in my RSS feeder, I saw that like, I don't know, Nat Poor, who I know socially, like wrote this article. Maybe I'm not gonna like read this whole article today. Maybe I will never get around to reading it. But when I bump into him, I can chat and I'll be like, oh, you know, I saw that crowdfunding article you wrote. That's cool. Or if a student comes to me and is like, you know, I'm really interested in studying crowdfunding stuff. You know, maybe I don't know off the top of my head anything about it, but I can say, oh, you know, Nat Poor wrote this article about it. You should check it out. So it kind of keeps it in my mind. So that's keeping up with the literature. In terms of where it goes, I use Mendeley as a reference management system, and I have been since, if I sort by dates, since 2007. And so, you know, this is over a decade worth of references, and I have a lot in here. You can actually tell in 2007 I was writing a paper about acculturation of immigrant groups. So I have all these articles in here that I probably haven't touched in a long time. What I like about Mendeley or any reference manager, I mean, the downside of Mendeley is it is owned by Elsevier, the publisher, whereas Zotero is another popular one that isn't owned by anyone. It's open source, so maybe that's better. But I think that this integrates fairly well with Microsoft Word. The search function is really good. So, for example, blackmail, the thing I just searched for, like I can just go and I can say, okay, what have I looked for? Whatever I've found, like put in my reference manager before, and I can very quickly see what I have. And oftentimes there will be doubles, like maybe I downloaded an article again, like it looks like I've downloaded these things from Keith Darden like multiple times. I can very quickly merge together, like here's two that I can merge together. I can just click merge, confirm it, and then I won't only have it in there once. So the search function is really good. You don't have to download the PDFs into Mendeley, but you can if you want. I generally only do if I had to get an interlibrary loan for an article, or I think like the PDF's going to disappear off of somewhere. The other big advantage in using a citation management system or a reference management system is that if you do anything later that you need to switch the citation style, like this just happened to me. The editors said they wanted an MLA, and then they came back and they said they wanted an APA. It was like 5 minutes of work maybe for me to fix all the references because I could just do it with a click. Also, what I like about this is you can actually share folders with people. So, and there's actually like groups that exist out there that some people contribute to. So like a student and I can both be contributing documents to the same place. So I love Mendeley. So how does Mendeley work? Well, if I'm looking at this article, I have a browser plugin. I assume it works with all the different browsers. I can say just save to Mendeley. And this little thing pops up and it says do I want to download the PDF? Sure. I can hit save and it saves it for me. And then when I go back into Mendeley and I sync, it'll just show up for me. It's not as good as detecting doubles or whatever, but more or less it works. So if I click back in there, it probably should. Okay, of course it decided to want to freeze up, but whatever. So it will sync back up in there. And you can obviously here's, no. Oh, here it goes. Yeah, so here it is at the top. And if you want to, you can also like add things manually, add scans, etc. So that's really cool. And then when you're in Microsoft Word and you're working on a document, this is cool. You can just click up on reference, merge citations. No, I just want to insert a citation. And you're like, oh, that great study by Nat Poor. You can go to Mendeley. I almost always go to Mendeley. I can say, all right, cite, and then I clicked the wrong one, but whatever. Then it just pops in really easily, and then I can say at the end, hey, insert my bibliography in APA, and it comes up. You can see in this one that the capitalization didn't come up properly, but whatever, you can edit it later. So it's really easy. So that's how I do reference management. But what about actually like the findings that you're reading about? The way that I keep track of those is I have Word docs for concepts. So for example, I've been working on stigma as a concept. And so I have a Word doc going where whenever I'm reading about stigma, I type in here as notes. This is a little bit tidier, but some of them are messier than others. So I usually will open up what's the conceptual definition, and then I just keep on adding. So if I read a cool paper on stigma, I'll open this up. Cool new thing that I found, and then just insert the citation. And this is just ongoing for me at all times that I keep this going. So then when I'm working on a paper and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to have my little section about stigma, I go to this. Now, it's also really important that I'm not self-plagiarizing, that I'm not just like copying and pasting this perfectly into multiple documents using the same concept. It's an ongoing process. But this is the place where I'm like building my mountain of knowledge about something. as another example, like this was, I pulled from the thing that I had about people using social media sharing as a method of maintaining relationships. So I have like the introduction, and then whenever I see something new, I just pop it in here. Like posting photos is also a way to maintain relationships. If I read a new study on that, I would just pop it in here. So I just know that my lit review is always kind of being kept up upon. Okay. Now I have to say that probably, it depends what kind of research you're doing and what your goals are. If you need a whole summary of exactly what the study had, then maybe, some people would maybe have like notes in their Mendeley where they're like, my personal summary of this study or whatever. Maybe some people do that. Maybe some people do that in Word documents. At me, at the stage I am in my career, I don't really need that right now. Like the summaries of the study, I can just reread it. I read pretty fast, so it's not a problem for me. But if I need the main finding, I can just have it in here. So there's other ways to do this too, not just Word docs. One way that I want to show you is through lit review tables. So this was something Jim Potter taught me in grad school about having tables where you keep track of major findings. So you'll have the citation, what was the theoretical framework, the independent variable, how it was measured, dependent, how it was measured, what was the method used, what was the main findings, what was the sample, and this was for a particular study about relationship developments, what was the stage, and then some notes. So this obviously can be varied upon. I'll show you guys one that I did. This was a while ago when I did a study on, where'd it go? Oh, here it is. On migrants and technology. And I did it in a Google Sheet because there were multiple research assistants working on it. And so you can see here it was like the reference and then the main findings. And then we were like tagging it. And you can see this is like location or something. And so we had this ongoing just to share notes on. So nice thing about doing a table is you can kind of sort things kind of easily. So that is just an example of that. Also, there are also just like reading lists. And this is really helpful for me when grad students come to me and they're like, hey, I need help. Do you have any reading lists on something? And so maybe sometimes these are personal. I sometimes do ones in Google Docs. So for example, I've been working on a reading list about marginalized people and using tech. And so this was my notes. I was putting in citations and then my own personal notes on that study or that paper. And then I opened it up to the world if they wanted to add things. Now I have to say there's a downside to this because when anybody can add things to things, and I set it up in this way that they could just suggest, they couldn't like delete or edit anything. Maybe I didn't necessarily see this particular study really being explicitly about marginalized communities, but the person themselves did. So like, for me, for example, no offense, Joe Wasserman, like this Classrooms Matter, design of virtual classrooms influences gender disparities in computer science classes. Like maybe that's kind of marginally about marginalized communities. I probably wouldn't have said so, but that person put this in there. So you kind of can like lose some of your control over these things, which is a bummer, but you also can gain a lot of stuff. It's now 2018. And it can be really awesome and you can get new ideas. So these kind of shared things are really cool. Another one I saw recently, Lucas is a faculty member at London School of Economics and he works on LGBT migration, and he has this like page on his website where he just kind of keeps up a list like this, and every now and then he'll tweet out like, hey, if anybody's seen any studies on LGBT migrants, like add them to my list, and he kind of keeps this up here on his website. So that's pretty cool to have as well. So I covered everything, I think. This is the system that works for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that it works for everybody. You kind of have to work through different systems and see what you can find. I'd also say social media can be really helpful. That following particular scholars on Twitter or whatever, see what they're talking about, can be really helpful too. But the fact is keeping up on the literature is important, synthesizing the literature is important, and then having a really efficient way that when you're doing your own writing that you can refer to the literature. Doing these in efficient ways that work for you is something that's really important to develop, especially as a graduate student. So I'm happy to talk about questions or whatever. Hopefully this video posts okay to YouTube, and thanks.